have you all here to celebrate the life of Betty Siemion. I'm probably going to say Simeon every time I say it. It's just in my brain that way, you know. But Eddie, I think I've been saying it wrong all these years. Betty never corrected me, but that's kind of how it is. So if you would stand with me, we'll open with a word of prayer, and then we're going to sing Amazing Grace together. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you, Father, for each person gathered here that has been touched by the life of Betty. We thank you for the opportunity to come together and to celebrate her life together. Lord, we thank you for the blessings we have in our life. We thank you for the blessing that Betty was in each of our lives. I just pray this morning as we remember, we cry, we laugh, that it would just be a good time, a time for us to encourage each other. You would give people peace through this process. We thank you, Father, for loving us. We thank you for Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Elizabeth Ann Burke Siemion passed away peacefully at her home in Sublimity, Oregon on February 28th at the age of 93. Just think about that. At the age of 93. Elizabeth is known by most as Mrs. Siemion, Betty, or Miss Betty. She was born February 4th, 1930 in Norwood, Georgia. She graduated from Perry High School in 1946 at 16 years old, and then received her first degree in 1948 from Middle Georgia College in Cochran at age 18. Due to a shortage of teachers in Georgia, she was able to apply for a teaching certificate, which allowed her to teach in the winter and continue her education during summer breaks. In August 1948, she began teaching in Jessup, Georgia. In 1953, she earned her Bachelor of Science in Education from Georgia's Teachers College. Still teaching in 1962, she earned her Master of Arts from Georgia Peabody College for Teachers, and at the same time was inducted into Kappa Delta Pi Honor Society. In her life story, she wrote how she learned cursive writing from the very beginning of her school years. Then at her first teaching job, she had to get lessons from another teacher because she had never learned manuscript, and the writing program they were using for the fourth graders began with the letter in manuscript and then developed into cursive. Betty traveled the United States with several of her fellow teacher friends, teaching here and there as well as traveling around. And in August of 1966, she landed in Cordova, and that fall started teaching the 7th grade. She taught school full-time for 39 years. 21 of those years were right here in Cordova. This would be her final stop as a full-time teacher and where she started a family. She wrote in a journal that she was going to teach in Alaska for 2 or 3 years, and then returned to school and changed her degree so that she could go work in a test kitchen with a large food company. In 1987, she officially retired from the Cordova School District, but immediately returned to teaching at the community college here in town and as a substitute when needed. Betty also became a full-time volunteer here at Cordova Community Baptist Church. She helped with many programs at the church, including the preschool program and operating the home port. Lending her southern home-style cooking, Betty loved to read, sew, needlepoint, paint. She must have tried every craft there was. One thing she did often was cook, from her southern dinners to her famous taco nights in Cordova to family night with Miss Betty's buns at the home port. She referred to her retirement in June 1987 as hanging up her look. She said when Pastor Harding came out to talk with her about running the galley at the Christian Center, it was her chance to reach her goal of becoming a cook. Just took a few years. In 2002, she became a grandmother, and in 2005, she decided to leave Cordova to spend time with her granddaughter. She relocated to the Kenai Peninsula, where her oldest son, Frank, and his wife, Sheila, had just built a new home. She immediately went to the local schools and signed up to volunteer. Soon, everyone knew Miss Betty, and she continued to teach and share her Cordova tradition of cooking until she was 86 years old. She retired from her volunteer work, but still taught through stories and experiences. In one of her Christmas letters, she said that Elizabeth is a runner, and while playing outside, Elizabeth yelled, "Come on, Grammy, run!" Betty said anyone watching would have gotten some giggles out of that, because this Grammy don't run. Sheila said she always had a project for Elizabeth to do at her house, that Elizabeth was a great student, and Frank and Sheila said they had to give a lot of that credit to Betty, because she was the one who sat and did homework with her every afternoon. She encouraged Elizabeth to let her imagination go in her writings and pictures and saved everything she did. Her story from childhood to moving to Alaska is truly an amazing tale. Living through the Depression, ration stamps during World War II, and numerous historical events, she witnessed some amazing moments, like being in a session of the United Nations on its 10th anniversary, traveling to France to learn French in order to teach it in elementary schools under a new program called Foreign Language in the Elementary School. Many stories of many places. However, the one place she always referred to as home was Cordova. Betty is preceded in death by her parents Robert and Ethel Burke, her brother Robert Burke II, and sister-in-law Faye Burke. Betty is survived by her son Frank M. Siemion III and daughter-in-law Sheila S. Siemion of Soldotna, Alaska, her son Edwin H. Siemion of Gladstone, Oregon, and granddaughter Elizabeth G. Siemion of Peoria, Arizona. She also has nieces, nephews, great-nieces, and great-nephews from the Burkes in Georgia, the Babbicks in Cordova, and all of the children she taught throughout the years. I'm honored that you guys asked me to come and be here today and be a part of celebrating Betty's life and just give me an opportunity to talk. I think I had a pretty unique relationship with Betty. Started out, she was my neighbor when I was a little kid, 2 doors down. Don't remember very much of that, to be honest. A few incidents with Frank and Eddie out in the street playing and having some good times. And I remember being scared to death of Frank for some reason. I don't know why. Dumped a whole bucket of water over his head once in a water fight and ran into the house and locked the door. And I don't think I came out for 2 days after that. And then as I grew up, Betty was my 6th grade teacher, like many of you here today. She was your 6th grade teacher. Then she served here at the church and the Christian Center while I was in college and after I got out of college and while I was going to seminary, and we kind of worked alongside each other there as co-workers. And then later I was called to be the pastor here after I graduated from seminary, and we continued to work together. And so I've kind of written down, the family asked me to share a few thoughts from all those things and those times, and so I've got a few from kind of each moment, and I think they just exemplify a little bit about who Betty is. I remember one time, I don't know if Doug, you probably remember this, but one time we came to school and we had a test that we were supposed to be taking. And Betty graciously told everybody that we were not going to be taking the test that day. She was going to give us more time, and I was very upset about that. I was arguing with her that we should take the test. And everybody else is like, "Shut up, John." I'm like, "No, I'm studying. Today's the test. I want to take the test." And so we had to, she loved that story for some reason, and she would, every time we'd have a work group here at the church, they'd be eating dinner, and somehow she would be able to work that story into the conversation about how Pastor John was so mad that I didn't let him take the test on the day it was scheduled. But yeah, I definitely remember that. I remember some of the challenges of being in 6th grade. I remember her being a tough disciplinarian, but someone who loved you and brought out the best in you as well. I remember going out to her trailer out by the marina for one of her famous taco nights, and I'm not sure how I got invited that night, but I did, and I remember going out there thinking, this is an interesting group of people. And it's just a real cross-section of people that were there that night that knew Betty, that had been invited to come to tacos at her house, and it was just cool because these people that maybe didn't normally hang out together, didn't spend time together, were all there having to get dinner together and treating each other with respect. And I think a lot of that was just because they respected Betty and who she was and what she had taught them. And it was kind of one of those things that just stuck with me for years. And then, of course, there's the look. Yeah, and then you got, oh, that was good, Elizabeth. Now you got to push the glasses back up. You got to push the glasses back up. That's right. I mean, if you know it, you know it, right? If you know the look, you know it. I'm not going to try to emulate it. I'm not even sure what to call it. But you knew you better change something in a hurry, right? She used them on us as 6th graders. I wasn't going to share this person's name, but their brother told me it's all right, so I'm going to. I specifically remember one day after lunch, we're all in the classroom, and Bill Estes had this wonderful talent that he could like burp and talk simultaneously. And he was sharing that talent with us, and I believe he was doing the entire alphabet or something, and she came in and stood there, and we all got real quiet because his back was to the door, so he didn't know. He kept going for a few more seconds, and then he kind of turned over and got the look, and sat down, and that was all it took. He went and sat down, and we kind of went on with class. But I don't know if it was disapproving, or if it was more like, don't make me come over there. I'm not sure exactly what it really was. I don't know if either of those things completely describe the look. Because even though you knew you were in trouble, or you knew you needed to shape up, you also knew it was for your good. And I think when you got older, you realized that it was actually out of love. Because she also always had a ready smile, a twinkle in her eye, if she caught you doing something right or you just made her laugh. You know, she used the look when she got done teaching. She still had it. The preschoolers got it. I remember. Sometimes, I won't name names, I remember a preschooler who had to go and sit in the office with Betty many times. And he would start to do something over in the corner, and she'd just look over and give him the look, and he would just shrink into the corner and sit there quietly until she told him he could go back to class. You know, she even used the look down at the home court. It wasn't unheard of for a grown man to get the look. Somebody she'd taught before, and they were doing something she didn't think they should be doing, and she'd just say their name across the room and give them the look, and of course they knew that was the end of that. Right? But it was done in love, like I said. And one of the things I really appreciate about Betty really has to do with our time working here at the church. Starting with my summers, when I would come home from college and help run all the summer programs that we had going at the church at the time. Then when I graduated from college and was here working a little more at the church and substitute teaching and coaching basketball with Bob Lenz at the high school, and then when I came back summers during seminary, and finally when I was called as the pastor, we worked together a lot. We spent a lot of time together. I have a lot of stories from those years, but the thing that really made the biggest impact on me was just our interactions and the way that Betty treated me. As this young punk, really, you know, young kid who was running the summer camps and probably thought I knew it all. I'll still do some days. And then later on a regular basis, and then, you know, as the pastor, she just always treated me as an equal, and she treated me with respect. We were in ministry together here at Community Baptist Church, and although I'm sure I frustrated her, and maybe even infuriated her at times, she didn't really let that be known. She didn't treat me like some kid that she taught years earlier. And when I was called to be the senior pastor, she respected me as the pastor, and she supported me as I tried to lead the church in the way that I best thought I should. And sometimes I wanted to change things, and people didn't want to change things. And Betty was never the one to say, "That's not how your dad did it, John," or "That's not how we've always done it." She's like, "Okay, well, if that's what you want to do, let's try it. Let's see how it works." And she'd stand out there at the entryway and take everybody's prayer requests as they came in, and somehow get them all typed up right before the prayer. And she'd slip it in through the door over here to me and hand me the sheet of paper, and I'd pray for everything. And some people didn't like that change to the service, but Betty never questioned me. She just encouraged me. We spent a lot of time talking down in the kitchen, setting up for home court. She's cooking. I had a lot of raw Betty bun cookie dough. I don't know, I'd always be in there sneaking. She's like, "John, we're not going to have enough buns." I'm like, "You don't need this piece." And I'd take another piece and go out and put up the tables and come back and talk. Steal another little piece of dough from her. And if I didn't do that, she would have used every absolute chunk of the dough to make a bun. Somehow she could like roll it back out and get one more bun out of it, and it fit perfectly in the little cutter. And I was like, "No, that's for me." I'd even take it off the tray while I was waiting to go into the oven. But I just really appreciate that she helped me grow as a leader, and that she encouraged me in that. And I think she did that for a lot of people, right? And that's the thing that kind of sticks out in my mind, is that from teaching school, and I got to share one little thing I read last night in her stuff. I was reading quite a bit of the stuff she wrote about herself in her early years, and they must have moved 100 times in like 5 years, it seemed like, trying to read through that. They moved a lot, but the crazy thing about Betty had this thing in her mind that she was only going to live to be 36 years old. She says that, she's like, I knew for certain I was going to be 36. And she kind of did. She lived to be 36 as a Georgian, and then she became an Alaskan at the age of 36. And she even said that. She said, for some reason, 36 was like a new beginning, a new thing. And like I read earlier, she thought she was coming to Cordova for 2 or 3 years for an adventure, and it ended up being a lifetime adventure and a couple careers: teaching, being a full-time volunteer here at the church, being a grandma. She had a lot of different careers and a lot of different things, and through all those things, I see this common theme running through Betty's life: that she loved other people well, and that she sought to serve them well. I'm not just talking about food, but I'm talking about nourishment for their soul as well. And they may not even realize they were getting that nourishment sometimes, but she was still passing along those little truths of life and truths of what God wanted for them to know, maybe without even mentioning it. And don't get me wrong, Betty was not perfect. Sometimes we have these services and we walk away thinking the person was like Jesus' right-hand man. But even Jesus' right-hand man made some mistakes and had some failures, and I'm sure we could tell some stories that maybe aren't so funny, or maybe other things. We'll see what other stories come up today. But when I think about Betty, I think about a life well lived. And I look back on her life and I find it refreshing and challenging that I can think of so many good things to say about her. And I'm looking forward to the stories that you all will share as well. And I'm thankful for her life. That it was a life focused on other people. That it was a life well lived. And it was a life that I believe made a difference for the kingdom of God. Eddie. You're up, buddy. Change plan, make some directions. That's fine. I'm going to go with the flow kind of guy. Sheila's coming up first. All right.
I just wanted to share the life that I spent with her and how we ebbed and weaved, and how she made me just the best daughter-in-law, and I was her favorite. family, and they took me out to Aunt Betty's house for taco night. And I didn't know anything about her except for that they went out there every week for taco night. And that the young man that I met on Main Street was her son. I was looking forward to, like, where is he? And when Frank walked in, she announced, really in that stern voice, "You're late." Or, I can't even do it. "You're late." And I looked, and the glasses was down, and there was that look, and I was like, oh, that's the school teacher look. And that look came out a few times, and but, you know, within 2 years, she was making me a wedding dress. So I made the cut. She was always there for us when she was always here, but I knew that I could always come here and just sit and talk to her, or just not say anything, and then she would, you know, eventually get it out of me. And whenever we were done and it was her time to give any advice, she would start with the same thing every time. "Well, love," and it's just, okay, and yeah, that's great. I still hear that word, those two words, not all the time, but maybe all the time the last few years since our daughter left. But I hear it, and it's Frank, and that's how he talks to Elizabeth when she's called home and something's going on. He listens. He's like, "Well, love, let me tell you." So when she came to Eagle River to meet her granddaughter, she brought a book. And it was, I don't know, within hours, she had the dog on her lap, Elizabeth in this arm, and she's trying to hold this book, you know, "Carry me, Mama," and, you know, she was going to read, and she read that book over and over, and I believe that Elizabeth could recite that book before she even knew how to read. So, Mom, like I said, was a big sewer, and she would sew anything. And she started sewing Elizabeth dresses, and she would sew pajamas. And one time I was like, "Yeah, Mom, I want Christmas pajamas for me and Liz." So she sewed over. She was like, "Well, I got this like fuzzy white stuff," and I was like, "Well, I don't want the fuzzy white stuff on my cup." She was like, "All right, I'll just put it on Liz's." So she fancied up Liz, and we took a picture. And I was looking at the picture, and I thought, I said, "Well, Mom," I go, "Elizabeth's like snowmen are upside down, with the right side on the back, and mine were the same, were like right side and upside down on the back." And she's like, "Well, it's okay, you know, I can't be perfect, you know." I was like, "Okay, Mom." But there were many times that when anything came up, Liz would go to Grammy. She'd come home and she'd tell, "Grammy's making me a bunny rabbit costume." I was like, "Okay." And Grammy's making me this. And then she came home with a little box with her own needle and stuff. So Grammy's going to teach me how to sew. I was like, well, glad one of us is going to learn. I didn't last long. She's kind of like her mother. We just don't sew. But her dad pulled one out and made Elizabeth some bat wings, but he took apart an umbrella and sewed them to her sweatshirt. And Mom was quite impressed with that. So she got one that was a sewer. In July, she would always order peaches, and I would just like, I can't, you know, here comes the UPS truck with Grandma's peaches, you know, so, and she'd take them around the neighborhood and kiss the out there and share them with everybody, and then she'd call for her granddaughter, and they would make peach jam, and then of course they would make rolls, And Liz would come home with the recipes for the peach jam and rolls. And as a, working mom, would be like, yeah, I really don't want this. Okay, you do that at Grandma's house. And then one time, Liz came home with the recipe cards, and they were in her own handwriting. And she said, Grandma's hand is shaky, so she couldn't do it, so I did it. And I was like, oh, okay. And, there are times I'm looking through and I find that, and I just think, what a treasure. Was her hand really shaking that day, or was she just teaching Liz to make her own recipe cards? And it was probably what exactly she was doing. She was always, when she lived next door to us, I always called on her, will you watch Liz? Will you pick Liz up from the bus stop? And when Liz started kindergarten, Elizabeth was the last person picked up, and then the school was right down the road, and so she was the first person let off. Well, I get a call. Sheila, bus just drove right on by. And I said, what are you doing? You have to go chase the bus, Mom. And she's like, I figured they'll drop her off at some point. I was like, it's the first day of kindergarten. I called Frank. I was like, your mother has lost her child. And she was right. They turned around, came right back and dropped her off. And like, sometimes I was like, I hate it when she's panic. And she's like, that's fine, Sheila. When she was, like I said, she was always there for us. She was always there to comfort us, to comfort anybody. I happened to come to the house, and she was on the phone and had just learned that her brother had passed away. And I think that was like the first time I ever saw her upset. And so I just sat with her and held her hand and talked about the time that, that I got to know Uncle Bob, and that we took our trip to Georgia and all of that. And she just gave me the biggest hug and told me, thank you for being here. You showed up today at the right time. And I said, I'm glad that I was actually here to do this for you, Mom, because you do so much for us that it was time for us to comfort you. And then as I hugged her, I said, Mom, don't forget I'm your favorite. And she would just chuckle, I love all my kids the same. And I was like, Mom, please just, you really love them more. And that's how that started, and I would do that to her all the time. I'd give her a hug, and I'd be like, don't forget, I'm your favorite. So, when she came to live with us, she felt like she was losing her independence because we had done all the cooking. And she had quit driving, and as she says, we got her a babysitter, but I was like, no, this person's here to chauffeur you around. You can do whatever you want. It's not your babysitter, Mom, she's your driver. And, she tackles on you a little bit here and there. And so she would get her to take her to Fred Meyer's. And she'd come back from Fred Meyer's with these bags of sweet potatoes. And I was like, she's like, I'm going to make sweet potato bread for this person or for this church. And it just constantly was happening. And I was like, do we really need this much sweet potato bread? And she's like, yes, take it to Pastor Scott. And I said, well, don't you remember Pastor Scott's diabetic now? I don't think he needs any more sweet potato bread. And then she told me that she was taking it to the school, or she was taking it to the pharmacy. I was like,
maybe the checkout lady at Fred Meyer's.
Yes, the checkout lady at Fred Meyer's. And I don't know what it was about that, but it just bothered me. I just was like, really, more sweet potato bread, like. And then after she had moved away, we were in Fred Meyer's, and a lady came up to me and said, did your mom leave us? And I said, well, she moved. I said, we moved her to Oregon. She's closer to her son, her other son and stuff. And she's like, oh. She goes, could I have her sweet potato bread recipe? She told me that her husband had a health, some problems, and one of the treats that he could eat that didn't bother him was the sweet potato bread, and that she would make it and bring it to the pharmacy all the time. And I was like, oh. So, when Mom passed away, I was like, what am I going to do? I started rolling my eyes and being upset about stupid sweet potato bread. So, I have made sweet potato bread, and it is in the back for everybody now, because it just would be what Mom would have brought. As she aged and her memory went, her eyes deteriorated. It was really hard to see her struggle because she just was such a go-getter and nothing. And this really, she would sit and I could tell that she couldn't see the TV, and she would ask us our names, and she would ask us where we lived, and then she would ask us where she lived, and it was just, that was really hard. And one of the things that I noticed was the pictures in her room of us were gone. They were on the wall, or they were on the windowsill, and it really bothered me. And I blamed my brother. I said, you don't want her. And he would say, no, that's not true. And it just became like the thing. We put them up, and then Ed would be like, did you guys put the pictures back up? Yes. They're missing again. Like, what the heck, you know? So that really was upsetting to me. But I just let it go. I was like, that's okay, it's okay. Then when she was in the hospital, after falling one time, she wanted to get out of bed. And I was like, Mom, you can't get up. And she was looking at me, she gave me that look. She was mad, and I was like, no, you cannot get up. You have to wait, we're gonna get some help. You know, you just had surgery, Mom. And she folded her arms like this, and she said, I don't normally listen to what my children tell me to do. Frank and I were laughing like, oh gosh. And I just thought, well, she knows we're her children, so she knows who we are. That made me great. She loved being on the arms of her son. And they would come, Frank would take her to church, you know, wherever we would go, and we'd have Mom. I'd always allow, she sat in the front, and they would get her out, and she would hang on to their arm, and she just beamed. And in the home that she was at, as we would walk, people would walk past, and she'd say, my son. And if they did not acknowledge that, she was like, she would give them the look too. So, there's a few things that I have realized in everybody about Mom. And Frank, you have Mom's patience, her ability to stay calm and to listen to others. You give the best advice, as she would. You would make sacrifices for your family just as she did. You also sit with your ankles crossed and pick your thumbnail just like she did. And sometimes you guys were in sync. Uncle. You have Mom's determination, her drive for independence, her love of history, and just like Mom, you're always willing to jump in and help with anything. You also have her gift of storytelling. Neither one of you can answer a simple yes or no question. It's always answered with a story. And my beautiful Elizabeth, Grammy passed on her love of books to you. The two of you can spend hours in the bookstore. On a side note, when she moved to Saldana, there were people in this room that loaded a U-Haul truck. And your dad and I unloaded the U-Haul truck, so I know that they will relate to this. But at one point he said, "Mother, how many boxes of books do you have?" And she said, "I went to the bookstore and bought every book that I wanted to share with Elizabeth and brought it." So I was like, I think we had 11 boxes full of books that were unloaded. You were also just as determined as she was to be completely independent. And your dad tells me this is a good thing. I know Grammy would say the same. She was proud of you and is up there telling everyone that that's my granddaughter. Myself, well, I learned how to make Southern fried chicken. I can make Betty's buns. I can make peach jam. And I also learned that a dollop of mayo in my mashed potatoes makes them creamy the way that Frank likes them. I also learned how to set a beautiful table with her china. The best discovery that we all learned was the missing pictures were in a bag that she carried around to show people her family. She loved us all. And I could not be proud to say Miss Betty was my mom. Thank you.
I said good morning.
Good morning.
I had this whole thing with me, and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense because it just would be too long. I'm going to read something that I discovered in my mom's binders of her history that I had no idea about. I sent it to Mary and Sheila. And it was a letter that to Governor Hickel because he decided to take her and her group's seats on a flight out to Rome. And this is the letter. And she got a response from me. So, Walter J. Hickel, Governor. Dear Governor Hickel, on Friday, February 24th, we sat at the airport in Cordova, tickets in hand. We awaited with great anticipation our trip to the fur rendezvous in Anchorage. An announcement was made that because of the weather conditions in quotation, Cordova Air would be able to pick up but only one passenger in Cordova. It has come to our attention that you and your party took our places on the plane. The best part, what we would like to know is, did we have a nice flight? And did we have a good time at the rendezvous? And it's signed Elizabeth Siemion. And I can't really read the writing. It looks like Mary Ann. And the last one is Mr. and Mrs. C. Starts with B. Somebody here probably knows what it is. So Governor Hickel responded like, a very politely corrected, nice, I'm sorry. Dear Miss Burke, I have your letter of March 3rd and can well understand your frustration in not getting out of Cordova. I have had like problems for the past 90 days getting out of Juneau. On this particular flight, we were advised that PNA would pick up the people in Cordova as they could not get into Juneau. I'm sorry if you were caused any inconvenience, but my total party consisted of me, and I want to assure you that I would have been most happy to hold any one of you on my lap. Had I known about the incident, you can readily understand that I did not have room for all five. With personal regards, Walter. And it's signed by him. And I came across this and I texted Frank and Sheila and I sent a picture of it. And I was like, Mom just filleted him with respect. Something I've just yet to still learn. In 51 years, I say something nice to somebody, and somehow the comma's not in the right area. But John had mentioned something earlier. Our last name is pronounced Siemion. Dad corrected me forever, and so I got used to saying Siemion. Siemion. We got made fun of in high school, and it bothered me. The definition of Siemion, spelled differently, is ape-like. So, no, it's not Siemion, it's Siemion, to get around that. Sheila, I want to thank you very much for you took the reins. For Frank and I, and made calls that we couldn't make that. Get people, what do we do, how do we do this? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't make phone calls to put this together. Thank you so much. It means the world. Just like you have all the effort you put in to making sure that things were happening, that they were moving forward. I just was going with the flow, just trying to make it through the process. And you were a fan. Well, you were. Talk all night. A lot of people used to ask what it was like to have a teacher as a mother. And there's a lot of people here who have teachers, who have parents that were teachers. But it was only specifically about our mom. She was strict. She had a dedication to those that she taught. She wanted them to succeed. That's all she wanted. So Steve, don't take it personal. She loved it. And I only know it's you because I saw you come in without my glasses. I can't see it. She was very, very adamant about you applying yourself. That's all she wanted. If you failed an exam, you weren't a failure in her eyes. You didn't apply yourself. You went out and did something you should have been paying attention and reading. I'm the poster child for doing the opposite of what she tried to impart on all of us as far as learn, apply what you've learned. You don't have to be perfect. Just be a good person. Do the right thing. And the right thing is not always what's right for you. It's just the right thing. She would have taco night, and some of the most bizarre requests for people to come over for tacos. A lot walking down Main Street, driving my truck, I get stopped. Hey, can I come up to your house for tacos? Sure. 1 week there'd be 12 people. 1 week there'd be 5 people. Sometimes there's 30 people. And Mom was like, oh great, so she'd stand back there and cook, and people would rotate in and out. It was a wonderful experience. Every Friday, every Saturday, she switched it for fishing. Mom worked around everyone else's schedule. But what she taught Frank and I was to work around their schedule, but plan. Think about. For me, it was think before you speak. For Frank, it was a lot. He's the older child. Responsible. I'm chaotic one. Who puts 30,000 miles on their truck in 1 year?
You were running faster.
Me. I got it me. Riding the bus, Mom used to threaten me out 2 mile out White Shit Road. If I didn't get up in time, I'd have to ride the bus. There's no way I was riding the bus. She would lead. I'd ride my four-wheeler. I tried to outrun the cops, and I did. Ed Weibel couldn't catch me. By the Mormon church, I went up into the alders, shut off my bike, dove into the bushes. He goes flying by. He knows who I am. And I get out to the house. I saw him go by. I'm like, I'm free. I get out to the house. I get off the bike. Mom opens up the window. She says, Officer Weibel would like to see you at the police station. Now. And on I went. She spent a lot of time giving me advice, giving Frank advice. And she was a really good listener. And then a lot of the people that she taught, like I said, saw stern, strict. At home, she was strict in wanting Frank and I to make the right decisions, to think before we act. That was a really important lesson that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. Because sometimes I'm a reactionary person. Frank, a nuclear bomb can go off and you have to look at it and process it. I'm already in order.
Drives my wife nuts.
So one of my favorite stories that Mom told when I was born, and as planets aligned this morning, and got coffee and Laura's there. I'm standing there, I look over and I see somebody that I recognized but didn't recognize. And it was Ed Shipman. When Ed was in Mom's class and I was born, he was convinced that I was named after him. And Mom used to love to tell that story. And when I saw Ed this morning, he was like, yeah, I remember that. And he went in to say how him and Evan Beadle and he named off him. He's like, oh man, we were rough on him. But she still loved you. She might have been hard on you, but she still loved you. And that was her whole career. Teaching was all about not you being an A student. It was about being respectful, listening, that order that she commanded when she was in a room. She didn't demand respect. She commanded it by walking in her presence. I've always tried to emulate that. It comes off as arrogance. I've got that face that looks like I'm mad when I'm happy. She always talked about her reward. All growing up, through high school, everything. She said, we were talking about life and stuff, and she said, well, when the good Lord calls, I will get my reward. I never understood what she meant. I honestly did not. I mean, that's a personal thing. That's a a reward to somebody is could be anything from a sunset to 911 channel surround system. I mean, really, you don't know what someone's reward is. What does that mean? fireside. She didn't talk. So I tried to figure out what that was. I saw Mom cry a lot. I'd come home and she'd be sitting in the kitchen and she'd have her hands raised. Most of the time I felt it was me, so stupid. I had no idea what's happening. I felt like her reward was to be at peace and to know that everything that she did everything that she could to do what was right and to not feel that she made any mistakes and to be free of whatever she felt that she didn't do correctly or the guilt she had about not doing something correctly. And for me, as I'm sitting there, she did it all right in my eyes. I know I'm her son, but I saw how she treated people. And I see people in this room that I know she loved as her own. She just did. So she never needed affirmations. She didn't require that. But never got the chance to tell her you did it all right. I might have been a little bit of a screw up in high school. Or just that point of view. But she did it correctly. Her whole goal of teaching was to just have people succeed in whatever they wanted to do in life. It didn't matter. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It was just about being a good person and taking care of those around you and being in a community. Corolla is a very unique place to live. That's why she stayed here. All of you were with me. And one thing that I will say, I used to say that Frank and I were spoiled. She would say, no, yes, we were. No, you weren't. By this time, Frank, I'm 4 years older than me. I'm 14, he's 18, he's graduated, he's out of the house. So Frank, I think you missed out on being spoiled because I know that I was. I know for a fact that I was spoiled. Well, no, you went fishing, you made your money, and Mom, it wasn't about money. You gave me so much latitude, so much room to make mistakes and not. My heavy price was disappointing Mom. That was it. That's all it took was the look from her. But she was never really disappointed. She knew that I was going to learn from that mistake, even though she told me not to do it. And, stick your finger in the hot oil and burn yourself. No, I won't. And I did. That's actually a true story. Literally the most important thing that my mom taught me, and my dad reinforced this, and my brother and Sheila know this. This is something that I thought and felt sort of kind of vindicated for the moments that I have said something that I shouldn't have said. I've put my feet in my mouth. I've had to have paramedics called to have my feet moved. I think that something is okay, an honesty level is okay to express, but there's sometimes we need to tone it down. She taught me the meaning of words, and that we sometimes say things that we shouldn't. And it's not because we mean it, but because we lack the ability to express ourselves correctly and properly. And so we'll go hard at something, we're upset, we're frustrated at. And she told me it's okay, don't do it again. But we do. She wanted to make sure that I knew that if you do or say something wrong, you correct it, you understand, you hold yourself accountable. You be humble, you be honest, you be good, and being a good person is all that matters. I'll leave it with this. was such an, it was so great. It was, all right, Mom's gonna be close to me. I left in '98, I would fly back up here, I didn't see her that often. I moved to the peninsula for a year. That was it. Now she's gonna be down close to me. COVID hit. Ourself from where I live, it made it impossible to go visit her because they would let you lock down, you could not go inside. So we would go around the backside and have her open up her window and call her, and we'd be standing from here to there, and she can't see, and she's got the phone and she's looking, and I'm like, Mom, how you doing? And I didn't realize the phone's upside down. So the speaker's up here, or the speaker's down here, and the mouthpiece is up here. And it was so wonderful to be able to go down and visit Mom. Every time we went down there, she's smiling, she's talking about family, and everybody at that facility looked forward to Miss Betty's stories. Stories about her childhood, stories about Frank and Sheila and Elizabeth, and people here teaching some of the people that she just struggled with. They are so smart. I do not understand why they don't apply themselves. Mom said that word. Eddie, you know, or Edwin Hall Siemion, those were the big ones. But I was blessed to have a Mom the last 5 years. I got to recoup about 10, 15 years of lost time. And you all have to understand, I just said y'all. Mom was 60 years old when I was 18 and Frank was 22. So she was already in retirement in her head, and she's dealing with us just now, like, here we go. We're adults, we're going to do stuff. And Mom said, please just leave me alone. Let me rest. Thank you guys all. It means a lot. There's a lot of really familiar faces here. I know Mom is looking down and proud of my part of all of your lives. She talked about all of you often, and I can see one person in particular wearing red. I don't know anything about fashion other than put a tie on and stuff. Miss Adams. We didn't get along in school. And I have to tell this story. I'm sorry, I got to tell this story because I told my mom this because it was amazing. Part of it was that poem that I wrote that Sparks of Brilliance in class. But I got on an airplane. I was 21. Yeah, I was 21. Ordered a Heineken. Miss Adams is sitting next to me, and I'm like, I'm drinking a beer next to my teacher. This is going to be awkward. We had the greatest conversation. It was amazing. It was all that stuff in school that I realized other kids had with my mom of, you know, fear, also wanting to be acknowledged, accepted, all those things that you have when you're a child. I had with Miss Adams. And that flight from Cordova to Anchorage, I've never forgot it. It was, I cherished that moment. We talked the whole way up. She was, what are you doing now? How are you doing this and that? And I'm like, do you remember you used to hate to call on me when I would read those stupid journal entries? And it was just such a beautiful thing. And I think back about how all the people who grew up and look at Mom now and remember what she was trying to do, the same thing that Miss Adams was trying to do with me. But pay attention, listen, keep your mouth shut, and you might actually move forward instead of arguing with me. Why did I get a C on this paper? You'd ask yourself that question. So, thank you. Again. English classes. Thank you all.
We're just gonna open up the floor here a little, so if anybody has anything they want to share, memory, we'd love to hear from you. You can just do it right where you're at. I'll just bring the mic to you, or Pastor Mike will bring it. So I knew my mom would kick it off. She's always good for that. So she's gonna go first. So you can stand up, Mom. You gotta stand up. That's the one thing I will say. You can't do it sitting down. That's my rule. But so think about a good story you want to share about Betty and.
Well, I want to share a story that I never was privileged to see, but she told it often, and I would always wonder about it, and we looked in her book, and sure enough, it's right in there. When she came to Cordova the first time, if you know, a long time ago, people didn't dress the way they dress now, when they were going to go someplace on the plane. And I remember the first time I came, it was sort of similar to hers. Anyway, she was dressed in a very fine suit. She had nylons on, high heels. She had a mink stole, and she was carrying her guitar. And she got off the plane because she was coming here to teach school. However, somebody who saw her thought she was coming to be the entertainment at the Cordova House. I have never forgotten that story. She told that story many times, and it's one that's just in my head. And the other story I would like to share is we had spent a lot of time together. We talked about tons of things. And most of you know I know how to cook fairly well, I think, actually. And I've given people things that I've made, and they thought they're okay. I cannot make Betty's buns the way Betty made Betty's buns. My buns don't turn out like that. And after many attempts, I finally decided I was just going to give it up and not do it. So I threw in the towel, and I don't even try to make Betty's buns. I can't do it. Maybe Sheila could give me a lesson, but something's wrong with my ability to make Betty's buns. So I have the recipe. I have the book right back there with it in there. It's a treasure of mine. I told John, even though you lost yours, you can copy mine, but you can't take it home. But I can't do it. So Betty's buns will always be famous in my mind because we had many Betty's buns and many fried chicken dinners on home board. And we had lots of other things. I remember one time the Coast Guard lady wanted me to make pizza, and Betty did not think that was a very good idea. She thought we were going to be stuck, but nope, this girl was determined that we were going to do it. The Coast Guard needed it, and this was before there were any pizza places in Cordova. And Betty supported us, like John said, and we made tons of pizza, and we sold tons of pizza, and after that we made pizza often, but Betty saw that, we could make pizza. It turned out now, Gail and I are still carrying on the tradition, and we're still making pizza downstairs, but Betty was always supportive. She always listened, and she always encouraged me, so I feel really thankful that she was in my life.
So I think one of Betty's gifts was bringing people together, and Homeport was one of the ways that she did that for us here at church. The family night dinners were a big hit. People would reserve their meals because they knew that she'd run out of that great Southern fried chicken. So a year and a half ago, Susan and I were like, we need to do family night again. We've just come out of the pandemic. Cordova needs this. So we're going to start family night again. And not until like the last meal, I think, that we were like, okay, we're going to really honor Betty now with a fried chicken dinner. It was kind of like, okay, should we like put the word out ahead of time that it's not going to actually be Betty's buns, it's going to be Rhodes frozen bread dough from the freezer buns. And it's not really going to be fried chicken. It's going to be chicken that's fried, but it's not going to be Betty's fried chicken. We sold out just because we probably didn't put out those qualifiers before. Anyways, we really, I think, want to continue to honor her in that way because the way she brought people together is, I think, one of her biggest gifts that we'd like to carry the legacy on. And I also wanted to let you know that I have a theory about the look. The look worked, so, for decades, right? So, that's why she did it all the time, because it worked. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Anybody else? Great.
My first year teaching here at Cordova, I met Betty at the beginning of the school year when we had both buildings together for an in-service. So you don't have to be around Betty very long to realize that when it came to teaching, she was a titan. you know, you had a lot of respect from her from the very beginning. So I'm new teacher, new to town, all of that, and I get a phone call from Betty, third quarter, middle of the quarter, at home. And she said, "This is Betty Siemion, and my son Eddie is getting into a lot of trouble in one of his classes. And I checked with Mr. Lenz, and your class is the only class we can transfer him into out of this other class." And of course, Betty is so professional. And she says, "I know this is a huge favor. I know it's the middle of the quarter, you know. I know all of those things." I said, "Oh, that's okay, I'll take it." So Eddie entered my classroom that Monday. Before Friday, I caught him throwing pasta on the ceiling to see if it would stick. And he was in the kitchen farthest from me at the time. So I looked over the 4 kitchens and I gave him the look, my look. I didn't know about Betty's look. So anyway, he immediately stopped, went and got a ladder from the janitor, took the pasta off the ceiling. Anyway, at the end of class, he came up to my desk. He stayed after and came up to my desk and apologized. And, you know, done deal. It's all done. The best thing happened that night, though, when I get a phone call from Betty saying, "Thank you for taking Eddie on. He shared with me what happened today, and he said that your look is scarier than mine." I said, "Thank you for the compliment." Fast forward 20 years, 1992. My little twerp is 4 years old and in preschool, and Miss Betty is the principal. And he would come home occasionally and tell us that he got to hang out with Miss Betty in her office. Like that was a good thing. So cute. Only, you know, she understood kids like life, and kids like it. And so at that time, Lynn Welty was babysitting him. And so Lynn would always come and help Grandma Harding and Verna and Betty, you know, cook. And she would always say that she couldn't get after Leif because he acted just like Miss Betty, teasing all the other women while they were cooking and stuff like that. So it was great. So we have very fond memories of Mrs. Siemion in our family, and also Ed.
Well, another teacher will follow here. Eddie, thank you for that story, and it's interesting as I see you, I do not remember that conversation at all on the plane. And it's a real testament then to the point that you never know your impact on a person and what they'll remember, right? And my memory of Miss Betty was that my first year teaching, there was an incident where a family had written this very long, unkind letter about me and then read it out loud at a school board meeting. And I was distraught, and I didn't know what to do. And we had some sort of teacher meeting, and Betty came up to me and she goes, I said, "I don't know what to do with this." And she said, "I'll tell you, you don't have to worry about anything." That's wonderful, sort of calming, I know these people, don't worry. And, you know, that's all she had to say to me to make it go away. And it was wonderful. And as a mentor, this new person who was really uptight and doing everything the way I thought I should do it, there was the mentor, the experienced person who could guide me. And she appeared in my life at the right time. And one other comment is that, Elizabeth, I never met you, but I remember sitting here once at an ecumenical service for Thanksgiving, and going around saying, "What are you thankful for on Thanksgiving?" And Miss Betty got up and she said, "I am very thankful for my granddaughter." And I thought, what a wonderful young woman you've grown into, and how wonderful it must have been to have her in your life. So, thank you, Miss Betty.
Bob back there in the back.
Thanks, Mike. I remember Betty so fondly. She's generous with her time, and you know, we spent a lot of time down at Homeport, and she just her food is outstanding. But I remember a couple things, and I'm jumping around a little bit. My son Brian liked to fly airplanes in here, and so he would stand in the back and he'd fly them up front. He'd stand in the front, fly them back, see how far they'd go. Well, he got in trouble with Miss Betty a couple of times there, and but she lined him out, and that was good, and Brian turned out all right. So at Homeport, her food was fantastic. We'd bring our family down there, and she cooked. The one that I remember is the potatoes and gravy. I'm a farmer kid, and I liked it so much. I'd tell her, "Oh, that's so good, Betty." Oh, anyway, it ended up being called Farmer Bob's, and now my daughter Erica, "Dad, do you want something special to eat? Do you want some Farmer Bob's?" "Oh yeah, that sounds great." Finally. Betty was generous with her time. She sent us Christmas cards for years and years and years, and we always kept up with her. We loved her. The world is a better place because Betty was in it and is in it and in our hearts, and I love her. She was a good influence on our family and my kids and our lives.
I'll share really quickly. Darla Church, who isn't here because she's recovering from surgery down in Seattle, sent me a message this morning that she was always inspired and thankful for the service that Betty did here at the church and the Hardings. And she said specifically she wanted to mention that just this last year she painted a 3-panel mural downstairs, and she did that in honor of Miss Betty and all the work that she's done in the Hardings and just the commitment that's been shown in serving the church. And so she said she especially wanted to have that mention, she was thinking of Miss Betty and Susan and so many that just gave so many hours and continued to serve so much in doing that. And I'll say it's a testament to Miss Betty and all the work that she did that I was not blessed to know her, but only being here a few years, I feel like I do know her because everybody has Miss Betty's stories. Including, like Gail said, when we started Homeport, and everybody, "Are you going to have the buns? Are you going to have Miss Betty's buns?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, we're not. I'm sorry." I had to apologize as we were getting that started to everyone because they were all heartbroken that we wouldn't have them. But she has left a legacy here that will, I think, reverberate for years and years and years to come. Is there anyone else?
Mostly, I just wanted to tag on to that comment about Darla Church, because she's a big influence on Cordova with problem solving. So I lucked out. My son's tall, basketball body, not a basketballer, loved problem solving. So we would go to Soldotna. Anita was amazing, helped get this all going, and I was just a sidekick, which was all I needed to be. At the end of the day, we would go to Soldotna, and Betty would always come over for our Mexican feed night over there. And it was so fun because here she is popping in, and Elizabeth was quite a bit smaller back in those days. It was wonderful to know you over the years. Problem solving. Wow, okay, so we back up. We're at Homeport, 1987, she retires, 1989, I had a problem. I'm at Homeport because she goes, "You gotta help me," right? So Deb and I pop in to volunteer. Not that big a deal, but she goes, "Actually, I'm covered too. Just relax." So I have a stack of halibut ganyons out there, and we're tying halibut ganyons. She goes, "You need to recruit people." In her heart, she was a problem solver. She's like going, "No, come here. This is the way you do this." And by the end of the night, I had the entire Homeport tying my halibut ganyons. That girl was awesome. So anyway, she helped us as problem solvers at that level, and then all the way to where she got to come see the fruition and the energy Cordova put into problem solving. And I was really blessed to know her. So that was a pretty amazing girl.
you know, me and Eddie grew up together, we're the same age, and so we'd always have sleepovers, you know, and this, that, and the other, have sleepovers in other places, but every time we had a sleepover at Eddie's, we were hellions, and we caused a lot of trouble, and finally, Miss Siemion would come and give us the look, and then we do it a little more, then she'd give us the look, and maybe we get some stern words, but you know, at the end of the night, she would come and tuck Eddie and Frank in, and then she'd come tuck the other boys and give them a kiss on their head, you know, and then as the years went by, you know, when she retired and was in, like working at the home port, you know, you go in there and every time she'd see you, it didn't matter when it was or how old it was, she would always make mention, oh, there's one of my boys. And she did that with a lot of people, and she just had a way of making people feel special. And I'll always remember that for the perspective.
Anybody else?
We got to know Miss Betty at home court meals too on Thursday nights, and the chicken nights, she knew I didn't, she always had potato salad. And she knew I didn't like pickles. And so she would take and make potato salad, and she'd take out a bowl for me before she had the pickles. Very, very special. Well, one night, for whatever reason, I don't know, because we always try to be there, I always try to be there, for the night with our kids. There was a chicken night, and we didn't make it. And so the next week, we showed up for probably enchiladas or something. And she says, I had a bowl out for you, and you weren't here. And I go, oh, look. I think that was the first time I ever got the look. We never missed a chicken night. And then we heard, when we heard Elizabeth was with us, and I knew the handwriting was on the wall. That it wasn't going to be long, and she was going to be over there in that area. That was kind of, I thought, oh, my Thursday nights are blown. But anyway, Kelly, our youngest daughter, lives in New York, and she makes Betty's buns. She has the little cookbook. She has a cookbook, and she makes Betty's buns at Easter and Thanksgiving for the family back there, for her husband's family and everything when they get all together. So it's spread to NYC.
Anybody else? Obviously have some opportunities after to just hang out in the back and chat as well and share stories with each other, but does anybody else have anything they want to share?
Oh, I'll say something.
Okay, Chris.
I don't think I need the mic.
Okay.
I got the look from Betty only once, and that's when we would sit up the desserts on the counter at home port, and then the food on the table, and I wanted dessert first. And I got the look because that wasn't a good example for the kids. So, but yes, she was a lovely lady and inspired a lot of people, and the world's better to have her, to have had her here. Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Working on it. Now's your chance, buddy. You can do it.
Let's see if I don't blubber too much.
It's all right.
It's okay to go.
Take it back.
You got it. You got it.
Ed and Sheila did a fantastic job. I really just wanted to thank for coming out. Thank you, John, for traveling all that way. It's a lot. We're still learning quite a bit. Just reading stuff that we had no idea that we did. She had, brother had stuff that he gathered because she was kind of losing her marbles a little bit. And she was, talking about the pictures, we always, like, why are our pictures not on the wall? What is going on here? So it was pretty irritating.
I thought she was mad because we moved here.
I assumed she was upset with us because she wasn't living with us anymore,
as it turns out, she was carrying them around in her cart to show everybody, which we found out later on, which was made us feel better. It wasn't really our job to feel better or not. It was just her doing her thing. But gosh, there's so many things that she's written down that we just either heard, didn't listen, or didn't know. So it's pretty neat listening to Edwin and Sheila read through them and learn more stuff, which is exactly what she would want. So it's been a real privilege having her as my mom. And she'll definitely be missed. We've missed her for a few years since we moved her down south. We struggled with that quite a bit. But she needed more interaction. She just wasn't with both of us working at home or away from home. And even though we have a caretaker for her, it's just not enough. She was kind of getting depressed a little bit, and had a couple episodes. And she said, I think you all need your house back. I think you need to find a place for me. And we struggled with that. But we knew it was the right decision for her. It was just us that were struggling. She wasn't struggling. She knew what she wanted to do. And so we made it happen, and we got to spend more time with her, which is fantastic. And she made a bunch of new friends, and a new pastor, and all the things that she loved to do, writing and reading. She couldn't really knit anymore, but she sure tried. We have some paintings that she really didn't want us to look at because it wasn't her best work. But she had a great spot there. We really were pretty lucky, I think. And
She learned to boss the way.
she
thought she was the manager.
we were told that she owned the facility that they were in, and those were her workers at some point. And she made that known to all the office staff that she was proud of the work that they did. She had her moments of clarity, and then some that were not so clear. But everybody seemed to enjoy her there. We got really good feedback from everybody, which is very cool. And they all become family at that point because of their location and where they are, which is a struggle for a lot of families having to do that. And I've never done it before. I have no idea what to expect. Thank you to Brother Ivy. She took care of pretty much everything. I just had a couple jobs to do, one of which was pack. As a man, sometimes, men, listen up. Your wife does everything, and you have just a couple things to do, right? Well, you have your luggage. I'm putting everything in there: socks, underwear, shirts. I got my bathroom bag in there. Closed it all up. We put whatever other stuff in the suitcase. We're heading out the door. Oh, I have shoes. Shoes would be good. So I grabbed my shoes. We get all the way to Anchorage. And we're driving down the road, and I don't know why I thought of it, but I'm like, pants would probably be pretty good. So, fellas, don't forget your pants when you're, especially going to your mom's memorial. So luckily, my friends, Ron and Chris, if you're watching, thank you. Say, took daughter, got me some date pants. Thanks again to everybody for coming out. I know some of you traveled, and we really, really appreciate that. Yeah, that about covers it now. Thank you. Thanks again.
Read a couple of verses here real quick in closing, and I think just as you've heard all these stories, it's just a reminder that Betty really was invested in other people, that she loved other people, and I believe that's because she loved God too. And that's what God calls us to do, is to love other people and to love Him, and she did that well, and I'm sure that she was able to hear Him say to her, well done, my good and faithful servant. A couple verses from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4 that Sheila picked out. She says one time she was just kind of worried and felt like she probably should have been comforting Betty, and instead Betty comforted her with these, was comforting her, and these words kind of reminded her of that. And I think there's a great reminder to all of us, that we have an opportunity to comfort others and to be comforted, and that God calls us to do that. And so the verses here from 2 Corinthians says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us all in our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort that we ourselves have received from God." Let's pray, and then we will sing our last song, and then we'll be able to go in the back and just have some time of fellowship and continuing to celebrate Betty's life together. Heavenly Father, I thank you for each person that's here. I thank you that we have the opportunity to celebrate Betty, to laugh together, cry together, as we said before, God. But I really thank you that we have your Holy Spirit, God, to comfort us, to encourage us. And Lord, I pray that as we leave this place, that we would be reminded of how Betty has influenced our lives, that we would pass that on. There's lots of ways we can do that, but that we would remember the comfort that she brought to us in different times, that we would remember the joy that she brought to us, as maybe we shared a meal with her or a meal of her making. God, I pray that we would remember the lessons that have been passed on. Some maybe we learned from her directly, some maybe we learned from another who she touched. But God, I pray that you would just use this time as we celebrate her life, that it would be a continuation of celebration throughout the coming years, that our lives being touched by hers would touch others, and that would be for your kingdom and for your glory, God. Bless our time here in the back to share and to celebrate. Help it to be an encouragement and a comfort to each of us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
The family,
Go ahead.
the family chose this song today because it was something they remember Betty singing. And I would say that that's pretty appropriate because it's all about that reward that she was talking about. That he can enjoy this. Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away.
opportunity to share the family.